Everyone, it's not working. 1, 2. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Ça, on entend pas trop. Good evening, everyone. So just before we start the ceremony, I just want to remind you of with the COVID rules. When we're in the audience, sitting in the audience, we need to keep the mask. When you come on stage, you can remove it, and you can obviously wash your hands up before you're joining the pupitre. Sorry. Please also mute your cell phones for the duration of the graduation. Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone.
Dear students, dear members of the Henri Dunant Foundation, dear faculty and TAs, dear colleagues and friends, welcome to the graduation ceremony of the Geneva Academy for the academic year 2020-2021. What a pleasure to see you all in person here at the Maison de la Paix, and also to know that some are following online, and that we are all here together to celebrate the success of the students and participants of our 3 master's programs, the LLM in International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights, the Master on Transitional Justice, Human Rights and the Rule of Law, and the Executive Master in International Law in Armed Conflict. Dear students, in total, you are 89 students, 49 from the LLM, 26 from the MTJ, and 14 from the XMAS, who succeeded in one of these 3 highly competitive programs. So congratulations, you did it. Bravo. This is a huge success. To reach that goal, you had to overcome many hurdles and barriers. One, geographical barriers. You came from all around the world. I could name a long list of 41 countries. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. And you represent all continents, with a variety of countries, from Australia to Zimbabwe, from Azerbaijan to Peru, from the US to Ethiopia. With this experience in Geneva, you have demonstrated mobility and agility while pursuing your studies. Second, you had to overcome sanitary barriers. COVID-19 was with us almost all along in 2020-2021 and forced us to stay home and to learn, teach online for many months. This has been a significant challenge for us all, students, professors, the administration of the Geneva Academy. But we have talked about COVID ad nauseam, and I promised myself that I would mention it just once tonight. Done. So what matters is that you have shown and developed resilience. And this is a special skill that is so useful in life, especially when working in terribly difficult situations such as wars and other situations of violence. A third barrier is language or cultural barriers. You have been evolving in a multicultural city and community. You learned from your peers by listening and trying to understand other perspectives. And some of you may have even learned some French, I hope, when going out and spending time in the sun along the lake. You acquired new language skills, and French was the first international language. And you showed open-mindedness and cultural sensitivity. A fourth barrier can be economic barriers. Studying in Switzerland is costly. And we know for a fact that studying abroad involves finding part-time jobs to supplement the budget. It involves saving income or obtaining scholarships, etc. We are so glad to have at the Academy the possibility to offer a respectable number of scholarships. We had 28 in 2020 and 2021, allowing exceptional students from all around the world to participate in our programs. And this ensures true diversity, geographical diversity, but also socioeconomic diversity. A fifth barrier, psychological and physiological barrier, for lack of a better word. You had to trust your own capacity to read and understand hundreds of pages of case law, scholarly writings, reports inter alia. You had to adapt to very different teaching styles and methodologies. You had to study for long, very long hours to produce papers, prepare exams, develop pleadings, produce reports in the context of your internships, and so on and so forth. It was hard, but it was worth it as you developed a unique expertise. These are just a few barriers that came to my mind. Each of you probably had different ones and perceived them differently. Not only have you overcome all these barriers, but you have also built bridges. Bridges between different bodies of international law and even between various disciplines. What a satisfaction to read your Llm Mtj XMass papers and to see how you combine the knowledge from the various courses you had at the academy in order to provide new and convincing arguments and make policy recommendations. You are the future of humanitarianism, understood broadly. And I'm sure that thanks to your multifaceted expertise, you will contribute to break silos, to avoid over-specialization in one field of international law, to gather experts from various disciplines, to succeed in humanitarian projects. Second type of bridges, bridges between theory and practice, between facts and law. In her opening lecture for the academic year 2021-2022, Dr. Helen Durham, the Director of International Law and Policy at the International Committee of the Red Cross, demonstrated very elegantly last week that humanitarians are not utopians, but pragmatic individuals trying to find concrete solutions to complex issues. This is equally true for experts working in post-conflict settings and transitional justice. That is our hope, that you will use the knowledge that you have gathered at the academy and apply it in countries facing wars, other situations of violence, terrorism, as well as in countries or even regions transitioning from war to peace. Additionally, making links between the field or domestic realities with the international stratosphere, well represented in Geneva, is essential for the implementation of human rights and IHL, and more broadly to ensure the effectiveness of the international legal system. Third, bridges. You have built bridges amongst fellow students. By coming to Geneva, meeting fellow students, participants, meeting professors, practitioners, experts, you have built or reinforced your existing network. Cultivate the friendships that you have made at the academy. Maintain the links, help each other in finding jobs, in developing projects, in making further connections. Since the academy has been created in 2007, we have trained hundreds of students who hold now important positions in international organizations, NGOs, states. It is my firm intention to keep alive, strengthen, and develop this community of alumni. But we need your help for that. And I count on you to register on our LinkedIn group for alumni. By the way, at the moment, we are also hiring a coordinator of professionalizing activities who will notably have the job to develop our alumni network and to facilitate connections as of 2022. The three bridges I just mentioned are mere examples, and in my view, some of the most essential which will stay with you in the future. Given all the barriers that you have overcome and all the bridges that you have built, you can really be proud of yourself. I would like also to acknowledge and congratulate your parents, your brothers and sisters, your friends who supported you in this endeavor. And of course, I would like to thank our professors, the former co-directors of the MTJ, the TAs, and a special thanks to Danny Diogo, the coordinator of master's programs. Yes. You really deserve it. And the students' office and the GA staff as a whole for their hard work, for their dedication and enthusiasm. Your success is their success as well. I wish you all the very best for your future, a future that you will be able to shape, not only in your best interest, but also in the best interest of victims of armed conflicts and other situations of violence, in the interest of silent or silenced victims of atrocities, in the interest of humanity. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, and thank you for this energy. Unfortunately, Professor Vincent Chetaille, who is the president of our board, cannot join us tonight for reasons that go really beyond his will. But he's saying hello and he's supporting us and congratulating you, all right? So we can now go to the students' representatives who are going to tell us a few words about their experience. Lea Redder from the LLM. You have the floor. Thank
you. Well, as the screen mentions, I'm Lea Radai, and I represent the LLM class of 2020-2021. 410 days ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. And what a year that it's been. The first day of classes was in a room much like this one. It's like an auditorium with a screen much like this one. But it was located a few kilometers away at UNIG, the University of Geneva. It felt like a movie that first day. Maybe because I was watching it from a screen, from the comfort of my home in Ethiopia. Yeah. And I watched as my classmates filled the class. A few other classmates, however, their faces were much bigger on the screen because, like me, they were at home. They were following from home. We were the first batch to start classes hybrid, some online and some in presence. This speech is for everyone who attended class that day and every other day after that. I remember feeling excited and intimidated that first day. Excited to be in a class filled with brilliant students that have already accomplished so much. Intimidated for exactly the same reason. I couldn't be prouder to say that I have studied and graduated with you all. We've learned so much this year, didn't we? In addition to our enlightening formal classes, we also learned so much about ourselves, our potential, and our strengths. But this does not in any way shadow all the struggles we've had to face this year. Each one of us fought our own personal battles alongside the stress of classes, all while in a pandemic. Some of us had family problems we had to attend during classes. Some of us experienced our countries at war, while we sat here fearing for the lives of our loved ones, while at the same time applying IHL to every news that we heard. Some of us battled life-threatening illnesses while in this program. But we all persevered because there was no choice but to persevere. Like a good friend once told me, Leah, you don't have the time to cry, so just do like me and cry in the shower. 2 birds with 1 stone. We also learned time management. Despite all of this, we did manage to create a family here. We created the family through our lakeside chats, our tears, and our laughs. We created strong bonds through our collective trauma and our achievements as well. Despite all of this, we were resilient, holding each other up and supporting one another. This day is a day for celebrations, and we thank and acknowledge 3 groups of people on this day. First, our gratitude goes out to our loved ones, who, though near or far, still supported us, nurtured us, and pushed us every single day. They allowed us to cry to them, albeit virtually. They heard all of our complaints. They knew all of our professors and our friends' names by heart and supported us as if they were here with us in person. We see you, we thank you, we love you. Second, our gratitude goes out to the Geneva Academy, which allowed us to come together to learn from the most respected scholars in the field and accumulate a vast amount of knowledge. And we just pull this out every single time we hear news about an armed conflict or a human rights violation. Thank you for making us experts and supporting us throughout our journey here. Third, and most importantly, this is an appreciation for the Geneva Academy class of 2021. I was right to be excited that first day, because this truly was the most brilliant collection of students. I am so proud to say that I have shared a class and learned with you all. Everyone's fiery passion and ambition for a better tomorrow lets me know that the future is in good hands, because it's in our hands. This is the class that would make a massive positive impact in the world. We are the thought leaders and the change makers. It's up to us to fix what's broken. I know that we can. Congratulations, class of 2021. We've officially made it.
Thank you for this powerful speech. It was amazing. So now I welcome the representative for the XMAS program, Sol Spindler. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, professors, teaching assistants, secretary assistants, students, and guests. I have the honor to say a couple of words about my personal experience and opinion about the Executive Master Program of Geneva Academy. Well, when I was a child, about 12 years old, I read a science fiction novel. It was I Raised My Father. It was written by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and the story was about a bunch of teenagers who make some serious efforts to save the environment, stop arms race, and build a better future. Some parts of the scene was laid in Geneva. I was really impressed by those teenagers. They revolted as normal teenagers, but they still achieved global changes in the field of disarmament and environmentalism. That was impressive. In that book, the tasks seemed hard, but now, as an expert in disarmament and a finisher of Geneva Academy, I can tell that real life is much harder. Some years after reading this book, I joined the military service with the aim of becoming a peacekeeper. I had experienced pain, several damage, personal tragedies, while I have been serving in different missions. I started my research in the hope of adding something valuable to the work of those who want to build a more peaceful, stable, and secure world. I was led by an unstructured curiosity about a topic that I already had field experience. So I decided to return to the school desk. I wanted to learn from the world's leading practitioners in public international law, international humanitarian law, international criminal law, and human rights law, with the aim of a better understanding the root causes of armed conflicts and international legal possibilities of the resolution of armed conflicts. And that was the time I found Geneva Academy. When my classmates and I filled the application form to Geneva Academy, we gave moral credit to the school. That means we believe that it is worth spending time and money to graduate at Geneva Academy. On the other hand, when Geneva Academy accepted the application, it gave us a moral credit as well. Based on our previous experience and the preliminary application process, world-famous scholars, whom we all know, decided they gave us a chance to deepen our knowledge at Geneva Academy. This exchange of moral credits led us, the Academy, and the students to mutual benefits. We come from all around the world, but now we speak, and expectedly more or less understand, a common international legal language that helps us in possible future international negotiations. Teaching, studying, and graduating at the place where the Geneva Conventions were born creates an ethical responsibility for us, professor, assistant, students as well. I hope that we can spread the good reputation of Geneva Academy and its spirit all around the world, and our professors can be as proud of us as we, former students, appreciate our professors and their work. It was hard. Frankly speaking, it was so hard that several times I had almost lost my courage to keep on continuing. Now, as I stand here, I can declare that a well-organized, updated, comprehensive, and balanced legal material was presented to us. When I was wondering about the content of the graduation speech, I found that I should include some sentences about how this program will help me in my professional career. I know how it built, or how it has built my personality, how it helped me to become a more sophisticated analyst of armed conflicts and different international legal problems. I'm sure that we graduated at one of the most prestigious universities of the world. But a master's degree in international law in armed conflicts is not a magic wand. It's more like a master key or an executive master key that can open several doors and chambers of secrets, but we have to find those doors and chambers. It is a question whether these doors are the doors of auditorium of universities, international organizations, or belong to state administration buildings. But nevertheless, may the law be with you. I must say some words of acknowledgement. I know that it seems cliché. Everybody includes this part in a speech or a book, but I cannot bypass this topic. And you are in the sad position that you have to listen it out, hear it out. I hear words of acknowledgement of the professor, of teaching assistants, and the secretary of Geneva Academy. I grew up in a Central European country, and I was 13 when foreign troops left our state, and we bought our first English dictionary, not before they have left. I always heard the same battle cry from my mother and father: study. So I must thank to my mother and father, who were the greatest readers I've ever known in my life, that they never lost their belief in reading, studying, and knowledge, not even in the hardest years, and never lost their belief in me. I thank my brother for supporting me spiritually during these years I was working and studying at the same time. I also owe the words of acknowledgement to my wife, who never, not even at the small hours, questioned the importance of my studies and established a steady family background of me. And I owe an apology and an acknowledgement to my son. Undoubtedly, I stole time from him, but I have at least one excuse. With these studies, I wanted to secure his future. I wanted to secure his future in a material way, since I hope that this degree makes me more valuable on the labor market. And in a more universal way, I wanted to secure the peace of and in his future. I strongly believe that the more people understand and accept the principles of international humanitarian law, public international law, international criminal law, and human rights law, the easier the negotiations and more secure place the world will be. If somebody is uncertain whether it is a graduation ceremony or a beauty contest, it's enough to take a look at me to be certain that it's not a later one. But yes, I want to make my contribution, even if it is just a tiny one, to word peace. So word peace. The 3D combination puzzle of Rubik's Cube has 26 different elements. These elements can create more than 43 quintillion different permutations based on the position of the elements. Among the variations, only one is called solved, not this one. When each face of the cube has one color, let us call this solved position the resolution of an armed conflict, while the others are armed conflicts. In this case, the possible moves we make with the cubes, the frame of movements, can be characterized as international law of armed conflicts. Now we are in the finish. I do not use the word "and" of purpose. First, because sometimes I still not believe that in a couple of minutes my diploma will land in my hands. Second, the degree represents the end of an executive master's program and the beginning of a new possibilities. So let me double back to the previous sentences of my speech. In 2016, Harvard Law School's program of international law and armed conflict edited a book about war algorithm accountability. In 2021, a great study was presented in International Law Studies about the legal review of war algorithms. We hear more and more about war algorithms and legal reviews of them. I strongly believe that it is time to work on legal reviews of peace algorithms. It may help to solve our greatest Rubik's Cube, armed conflicts. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for sharing your experience and for such profound words. Thank you. Now we will have a video from Sasha Windsor. Mtj.
Good evening, Director, professors, distinguished guests, family, friends, and students. I'm humbled by this opportunity to speak today at the 2021 graduation ceremony as the representative speaker on behalf of the MTJ class. First of all, I must say that I am proud of each and every one of my classmates who enrolled and actively participated in a master's degree program amidst a pandemic with a lot of uncertainties. It was a difficult year for all of us, both academically and personally. Some of us couldn't apply for visas until weeks into the semester. Then some of us could not join the program in person at all. We learned how to support one another and how to be more accommodating for differently abled persons. I am moved by the resilience and the courage of my fellow classmates to carry on. From the difficult task of finding accommodation in Geneva to long visa procedures and then last-minute accommodation cancellations and even scams, then shift into completely virtual lectures amidst lockdowns that felt never-ending, we have thrived. There were also online dating adventures that some found love from, and for some, funny stories to laugh about. Not to forget, rushing to claim the Lafarge episode bag right after lectures, which is also how we saw each other offline. Eventually, our most awaited field trip was cancelled and then replaced by a marathon, which we even got a medal for. On a more serious note, bombs were set off in our home countries. COVID-19 took away our loved ones back home. We even had to undergo the loss of one of our professors. We still continued with quick counseling sessions amongst ourselves or replacing emotions either by binging a TV series or casually jumping to the freezing lake. We tried to keep each other fed when everything else failed, with picnics and potlucks or whenever we needed a midweek pick-me-up. Finally, it led to this labyrinth of suffering from unpaid internships and reduced job vacancies due to the pandemic. Still, we are here today at our graduation ceremony, the light at the end of the tunnel. Even with our differences and hardships, we were able to have enriching conversations that informed each other of our own experience back home and our country situations. Each and every person brought a new perspective coming from different backgrounds such as law, anthropology, policy studies, philosophy, public health, international studies, and so on. We learned and unlearned inside and outside the classroom. Oh, sorry, I meant to say Zoom. The former co-directors of the MTJ program were always accommodating to our needs, and I want to thank them for creating a safe environment for us. A special mention goes to the student office, to whom we have sent many long emails, and to my fellow student council members for drafting those long emails with me. I also take this moment to thank our meticulous TAs who went above and beyond for us past year. I am hopeful that those of us graduating today will contribute to a better world, where dialogue replaces violence in a conflict, truth is protected by memory, impunity is eradicated, victims' needs and rights are protected and upheld, past is dealt with by eliminating systemic and institutional inequalities. This master's program gave us the knowledge and the tools to work for the same goal, both with academic and practice-based approaches. This experience at the Geneva Academy is gratifying not only for our professional endeavors, but also for our personal life. We have made a network of friends from all around the world with whom we could connect with, taking an interdisciplinary approach to transitional justice, and even food adventures. I hope we meet each other in the field in future, endorsing the knowledge and practices we've learned in the past year. Until then, au revoir. Thank you and congratulations to everyone graduating today.
Thank you, Sashi, for having taken the time to record this very funny video. That was great. Thanks. So it's now my pleasure and honor to introduce you to Professor Olivier de Fruvil for his keynote speech. Olivier de Fruvil is professor at the University of Paris II, Panthéon-Assas, and director of the Paris Human Rights Center. He's also a world-renowned human rights expert. He's notably the vice chair of the UN Committee on Enforced Disappearances and a former member of the UN Human Rights Committee. He was also a former member of the UN Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances. He teaches in our XMAS program, and he's a member of the advisory board of the Geneva Human Rights Platform. So thank you very much for being with us today. We are really thrilled to hear your presentation, and I love the intriguing title, Towards a Global Transitional Justice. You have the floor.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Gloria. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's a great honor. I'm also impressed by the room, I must say. We've spent a year where we were not meeting so many people, so it's like suddenly, well, I'm thrilled, as you said. With the Academy and its predecessor, the QD, I've had a great friendship for more than 15 years now. And I hope also in the next 15 years, maybe. So I'm really happy that you're inviting me to give this keynote speech. On the occasion of this graduation ceremony, I thought you may not want to hear a conference about very technical issues of international humanitarian law or international human rights law. This is for the opening of the year. This is done when you start the program. Now you're finishing the program. You have learned a lot. You are now confirmed experts. You know all the details, how treaties work, what's the difference between a yak and a nyak. You know that, don't you? Whether armed NSAs can violate human rights, etc. That's a lot of information you have. So your minds need to breathe a little bit and think about the future. What's next? So I have made this speech for you. I hope you like it. Global transitional justice. We generally think about transitional justice at the national level. I'm turning especially to those people from the master. I'm speaking under their control. All the context about which we're thinking about transitional justice are in general characterized by the fact that the countries concerned are emerging from periods of conflict or repression, or conflict and repression. And the question transitional justice generally seeks to answer is, what processes can we put in place so as to deal with the past so that it does not happen again? And at the same time, how can we find the new foundations for a fairer society? Justice in this context means accountability, but also truth and reparation. Ultimately, transitional justice aims, possibly, to reconcile societies with themselves and build a better and a fairer society. But as Louis Joinet famously said, You cannot turn the page before you have read it. Now, the question I want to ask is, why are we always thinking about transitional justice at the state level? If we take the notion of crime against humanity, you very well know it was elaborated during the 20th century, and it was for the first time activated in international law through the statutes of Nuremberg and the Tokyo tribunals. And the idea was in itself revolutionary. It was the idea that some crimes affect not only the state's interests, but humanity as a whole, beyond the states. That is, each and every individual composing humanity. The notion of crimes against humanity is the foundation for the idea that international tribunals can judge crimes not on behalf of states, but on behalf of humanity. That is, on behalf of all citizens of the world, you and me. So if the crimes against humanity, including large-scale crimes like genocide, affect the whole of humanity, why is this that transitional justice process can only be country-based? We can all agree that crimes against humanity create a shockwave around the world. Everybody suffers from the consequence of that crime. If I am personally, as a citizen of the world, affected and prejudiced by a genocide which is perpetrated in a faraway country, why am I not able to participate in a transitional justice process related to this crime? If humanity itself can prosecute crimes through international tribunals, there must also be a concept of global transitional justice. And in fact, if we look around us, if we look at what does exist today in international law, we can see that there are already some global transitional processes. We don't call it that way, so I'm just proposing to put a name on things that in fact already exist. Look at genocide. The issue of genocide, and also some genocides, have been on the agenda of the United Nations for quite a number of years now. In 2005, the General Assembly adopted a resolution on Holocaust remembrance and decided to designate 27th January as an annual international day of commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust. In a similar fashion, the General Assembly designated 7th of April, as the International Day of Reflection on the Genocide in Rwanda. More generally, the United Nations has taken a number of initiatives to prevent future genocides, including the proclamation, again, of an international day, 9th December, as the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of all genocides and of the prevention of this crime. And in this context, the Human Rights Council has called on states, I quote, to continue efforts aimed at the memorialization and remembrance of past genocides as a way to prevent them by educating society, including as part of goal target 4.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, if we turn to slavery and colonialism, they have also attracted much attention at the international level. 20 years ago, the World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa, constituted an interesting attempt to launch a global transitional justice process. Again, the name or the word was not used at that time, but the intention was clear. The Durban Declaration and Programme of Actions states, among many other things, it's a very long declaration, that slavery and the slave trade are a crime against humanity and should always have been. It also stressed the importance and necessity, inter alia, of teaching about the facts and truth of the history of humankind from antiquity to the recent past, and with a view to avoid the repetition of such crimes in the future. Among many other follow-up initiative to the Durban Conference that we are now celebrating, the General Assembly in 2006 adopted a resolution on commemoration of the 200th anniversary of the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. It also decided that March 25th would become the annual International Day, again an International Day, of remembrance of the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. More recently, the legacy of slave trade and racism became central to a renewed global movement that started in the US with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. In reaction to the murder of George Floyd, the Human Rights Council held an emergency debate, a new type of activity, at its 43rd session. And subsequently, at its 47th session, the HRC decided to establish an international independent expert mechanism, and I quote, in order to further transformative change for racial justice and equality in the context of law enforcement globally, especially where relating to the legacies of colonialism and the slave trade. Another topic, colonialism. Legacy of colonialism is also now coming at the forefront. If you followed the last session of the Human Rights Council, the 48th session, you can see that China and some other states have sponsored and adopted a resolution on the negative impact of the legacies of colonialism on the enjoyment of human rights. Now, in a parallel and not necessarily connected process, I must say, the Special Rapporteur on the promotion to truth, justice, reparation, and guarantees of non-recurrence, in other words, the Special Rapporteur on Transitional Justice, my former colleague, Mr. Fabian Salvioli, submitted a new report to the General Assembly, this General Assembly, 76th session, on transitional justice measures and addressing the legacy of gross violations of human rights and international humanitarian law committed in colonial contexts. If we look also at the legacy of gender inequality and patriarchy and the consequences in terms of gender-based violence throughout history on all continents, this is also something which is looked at, although I must say to a lesser extent in the United Nations. In an important report published in 2018, the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women in Law and in Practice, the report was called Reasserting Equality, Countering Rollback. The working group noted that equality between men and women is humanity's struggle. It also called on the human rights community to make every effort to block any position in international human rights spaces that endorses patriarchal and discriminatory norms. Genocide, slavery, and slave trade, colonialism, gender inequality, and violence against women, these four themes are high on the international agenda. They call on us to look back in the past, know our history, and draw the consequences for the future to build an international society that is fair. It's clear, though, that there is still much what we would call in the United Nations selectivity in the way the UN is looking at the past, and this creates some tensions. You may have followed the debates at the Durban conference. There were some tensions, let's say. Grief on one side triggers defense mechanisms on the other sides, and sometimes misunderstanding between the different parties. A more balanced and exhaustive look is needed. To that end, a global transitional justice process would not only mean an international or a world transitional justice process, but also a process that would look at all the wrongs in all regions of the world, rather than being selective in its approach. But looking back at what humanity did to humanity is not enough. The structures of injustice, discrimination, and violence go well beyond what humans do to other humans. It also includes, and is inherent to, the relation of domination that humanity has established with the biosphere and the other living on Earth. As humanity denied other parts of humanity a right of existence, it also denied the existence of other natural entities that it called its environment. So if there is to be a global transitional justice, there might be a global transitional justice, it should also be aiming at telling the truth, bringing accountability and reparation for the crimes humanity perpetrated against the biosphere and the other living. It should be aiming at reconciling, possibly, humanity with so-called nature, so that humans can think of themselves as part of nature. Here again, international law does not start from zero. A retrospective look on an anthropocentric conception of the world is being taken at the global level. Take already in 1982, in fact, quite early, the General Assembly adopted the World Charter of Nature, in which it recognized inter alia that every form of life is unique, warranting respect regardless of its worth to man. So the rights of nature, you see, are not completely new. Now, how do we intend, and most recently, more than 25 years later, in a distinct but approaching process, Ecuador and Bolivia promoted the new concept of harmony with nature. And in 2009, the General Assembly proclaimed, again, an international day, the International Mother Earth Day, April the 22nd. So now, how do we intend to implement this global transitional justice agenda? Again, a number of processes, in fact, already exist, and we have first to build on the existing processes. First, legal tools. They play a very important role in global transitional justice. By legal tools, I particularly mean legal actions and strategic litigation based on human rights, international humanitarian law, and international criminal law. Accountability is key to moving a number of processes forward. Legal justice before courts, an independent experts body too, don't forget them, is a privileged way to make injustice more visible and dismantle conservative narratives. It also may help to claim for accountability of perpetrators, establish at least partial truth, and provide at least partial reparation to a number of victims. In the recent times, probably you've noticed, claims to repair historic crimes have multiplied, sometimes leading to success and always contributing to making these crimes better known to a general public. Legal actions in cases of violence against women, you've probably noticed too, are also on the rise. And as far as environmental justice and climate justice cases and trials, they have burst out in numbers. But if we take the experience of domestic transitional justice processes, we can see that legal claims and actions are clearly not enough. Very often they would lead, as I said, to partial results. And very often, in fact, they lead to more opposition between legal parties and may appear as a continuation of a war by legal means, what we often call lawfare. And as such, there is a risk that they may end up in fact, stressing, exacerbating the grief rather than leading to consensus and constructive reform. So besides those legal tools, there is also a need for other processes based on scientific knowledge and leading to political consensus in a global society. And when I use this term global society, I'm not speaking only about states. Of course, states count. But reconciling humanity with itself and with nature cannot be limited to diplomatic negotiations among states. Firstly, because states are different from peoples. There are peoples without states. There are also states without peoples, in fact, or very few peoples. And secondly, because states would generally have a politicized view of what a global transitional justice process should be. And in fact, this was the main critic addressed to the Durban conference, as it appeared to some extent as a field for confrontations between various national or regional interests, as represented by states or regions. The truth is that these issues of global transitional justice, looking back at the past, are too serious to be left to the states alone. There is a need for scientific knowledge to establish the truth about what happened and how it happened and what the responsibilities are. There is also a need for simple people, especially victims or their families, to participate actively in the process of truth-seeking. And also the interest of the biosphere and the non-human living on Earth should also be represented in the discussion. This is what is generally done in truth processes at the domestic level. The difference here would be that we would need a more global effort. This would include, on the one hand, scientists coming from all parts of the world to interact with the aim of establishing accepted historical facts. And on the other hand, members from civil society who would participate in global debates about past injustices based on historical facts. Doesn't mean that the government should be left apart, of course, but their proposals of actions regarding a global transitional justice agenda should be based on facts established by a global scientific effort and a global civil society discussion. In other words, we would need a science political platform for global transitional justice. It may resonate for some of you. We also, of course, have existing models. In a completely distinct field of international law, namely environmental law, the very well-known Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, but also the Intergovernmental Science Platform on Biodiversity follows such a framework. They do associate scientific knowledge with the states' parties' power as the main players in international relations. Closer to our issue, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance is also an inspiring model. It is, in fact, an international organization composed of 34 states, but the delegation of each state party is not led by a diplomat, but rather than by experts and academics specialized in this field. The aim of the alliance is to promote Holocaust education, research, and remembrance. Based on scientific knowledge and civil society's deliberation, the states could elaborate program of action at the global level in order to implement guarantees of non-repetition. This would include, for instance, mutually agreed acknowledgement of historical facts, and why not, a global history textbook. Overall, if it is not to achieve a global consensus, you can see I'm a dreamer. I'm not the only one, but I'm still sometimes coming back to Earth. If we're not going to achieve global consensus on all historical wrongs against humanity and nature, I think a global transitional justice process would make a contribution, even small contribution, to peace building through exchange and understanding among peoples. At the time where nationalistic passions seem to make a comeback and nationalistic leaders tend to instill suspicion on the others, there is a great need to establish truth about the past, respond to legitimate grief, provide accountability, reparation to victims, and draw the lessons from the past in the forms of guarantees of non-repetition. So here is a program for the 21st century. It's just something to bring back with you, a kind of souvenir from this cosmopolitan city of Geneva, a city of tolerance and peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivier, for this magnificent keynote speech. I learned really a lot, and I have to say that it's one of the most original speech I heard this year, really. Thank you. So now comes one of the crucial moments of this ceremony, and it relates to the Dino Prize. So I warmly welcome Mr. François Bugnon, who is a member of the Dino Prize Foundation, and he's going to do an allocution and the announcement of the prize. For those of you who don't know, Mr. François Bugnon is a key figure of international humanitarian law. He joined the International Committee of the Red Cross in 1970 and served as a delegate in Israel and the occupied territories in Bangladesh, Turkey, and Cyprus, and then as head of mission in Chad, Vietnam, and Cambodia. From 2000 to 2006, he was director for international law and cooperation at the ICRC. He has been a member of the ICRC Assembly as well. And he's the author of more than 50 books and articles on international humanitarian law and on the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. So we are very happy that you are with us tonight. And we have to say that the partnership with the Henri Dunant Foundation is extremely important to us. So we are very glad you are here. Thank you.
Dear Professor Gaggioli, eminent professors, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, since all of you specialized in international humanitarian law or human rights law, the figure of Henri Dunant is, of course, well known to you. Oh, it's a pity we had a Henri Dunant before. Indeed, he was not only the founder of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, but also the initiator of the first Geneva Convention of 22nd August 1864, the starting point of modern international humanitarian law. On the other hand, you will be forgiven if you never heard about the Henri Dunant Society, which is a historical and cultural association set up in 1975 in Geneva in order to promote research, conferences, debates, and publications on the life, achievements, and spiritual heritage of Henri Dunant. In 2004, the Henri Dunant Society created, at the initiative of one of its very active members, Mrs. Pierrette Mourgedalgue, a foundation with the objective of stimulating historical or legal research in international humanitarian law or in the other fields of activity of Henri Dunant by rewarding outstanding papers on humanitarian law or other aspects of the heritage of Dunant. Mrs. Mourgedalgue also made a generous donation which constituted the initial capital of the foundation. As stated in its charter, the objective of the foundation is, I quote, to reward an exceptional academic work which contributes to deepen, spread, and renew the ideals of Henri Dunant through law. The Henri Dunant Prize for Research has been awarded every year since 2005 in partnership with the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. In practice, the Academy makes a preliminary selection of the Llm papers submitted in the current year in order to identify among the memoirs that respond to the objectives and criteria of the Henri Dunant Prize, the best papers in academic terms. The papers are then submitted to a jury made up of 1 or 2 professors of the Academy one representative of the International Committee of the Red Cross, and 2 members of the Board of Trustees of the Henry Dunant Prize Foundation. This year, the members of the jury received 3 LLM papers selected by the professors of the Academy, all of them of outstanding quality. I avail myself of this opportunity on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Henry Dunant Prize Foundation to express our deep gratitude to the professors of the Academy who made this preliminary selection. After having read with due attention the papers submitted to them and taking into consideration the criteria stated in the Charter of the Foundation, the members of the jury, by a unanimous decision, decided to award the 2021 Henry Dunant Prize for Research to Mrs. Harriet Macy. To Mrs. Harriet Macy for her paper, Safe Zones, a protective alternative to flight, or a tool of refugee containment. The members of the jury considered that this paper deals with an issue of a burning actuality, since it focuses in particular on the so-called safe zones created by Turkey along the border between Turkey and Syria, but within Syrian territory, within the framework of the armed conflict, which unfortunately has been tearing apart Syria for the last 10 years. In fact, this is not only an issue of burning actuality, but as the author rightly points out, there is a serious risk that similar policies will be applied in other situations of armed conflicts in the future, which means it has also a prospective perspective. In her paper, Mrs. Harriet Macy thoroughly analyzed the consequences of such policies upon the right enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in other instruments for every individual to flee his or her own country in case of war or persecution, and to seek asylum in another country. Mrs. Macy convincingly demonstrated that such so-called safe zones are in fact a tool used to contain potential refugees in their own country, thereby denying them the right to flee their country and the right to seek asylum in another country. The jury was impressed by the innovative nature of this paper, which establishes the link between the so-called safe zones and immigration policies, or rather, anti-immigration policies. Furthermore, in many cases, such safe zones are used as an euphemism to cover what amounts, in fact, to military occupation. Finally, this paper sheds light on the interplay between international humanitarian law, human rights law, and refugee law in such situations, and demonstrates the author's mastery of the 3 branches of public international law. While fully consonant with the highest academic requirements and academic standards, Mrs. Macy's paper is also a convincing defense of the right of asylum, which is threatened by the setting up of the so-called safe zones or safe havens. Such advocacy is fully consonant with the spiritual heritage of Henry Dunant, and therefore fully consonant with the criteria of the Henry Dunant Prize. Dear Mrs. Macy, I am pleased to convey to you the warmest congratulations of the members of the jury, as well as the warmest congratulations of the members of the Board of Trustees of the Henry Dunant Prize Foundation. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased to inform you that tonight we have with us the presence of Ms. Cecile Martinez Dunant. So she's one of the descendants of Henri Dunant, and she will be giving the prize. What a privilege. Everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to Francois for your very kind introduction just then. Good evening. It's great to see all of you in person, as well as those who are joining us online. I firstly wanted to thank the Henry Dunant Foundation and the members of the jury from the Geneva Academy and the ICRC for considering my paper for this research prize, and for recognizing the topic which I wrote about and its alignment with the ideals and the commitments of Henry Dunant. I would also like to thank Professor Shatai as my supervisor for his guidance and advice in helping to shape my paper to where it got to. And thank you also to all of the professors and the teaching assistants for some really great courses throughout this LLM program, which informed a lot of the analysis in my paper. So I've been asked to briefly outline my paper, so I will do that now, just to provide a little bit of a background on the issue which I tackled and then some of my key conclusions. So as Francois just outlined, my paper was discussing the concept of safe zones, which is a term that has been used in a number of different contexts with varying meanings and also differing effects. To put it most simply, it encompasses spaces that are created or designated in the context of an armed conflict, with the outward intention of affording a form of heightened protection to civilians, including physical protection against actual attacks, as well as enhancing the possibility for them to receive humanitarian and medical assistance and other forms of protection. Safe zones do have a clear legal basis under international humanitarian law, and this foresees the establishment of these kinds of spaces in specific circumstances and will notably require the consent of all parties to the conflict, and they will have an exclusively civilian character, which, as we know, means that attacks cannot be directed towards them. However, in reality, and this began in the 1990s, we saw the establishment of safe zones of a different nature, not governed by IHL, but authorized by the UN Security Council, and then they were imposed with a degree of military force. And then, more recently, we have seen renewed discussions around the creation of safe zones in the Syrian context. This is again in a manner that is not strictly governed by IHL, as Turkey has taken arguably unilateral action in order to establish a safe zone in northern Syria with stated intentions to prevent the flight of individuals and also facilitate the return of those who are present in Turkey, despite the fact there have clear allegations of widespread violence and insecurity in these areas. While this kind of migration control narrative around safe zones is not new, the first key observation of my paper was that in the Syrian context, there is an increasingly prominent and explicit association of the establishment of safe zones with refugee containment strategies. And therefore, against that background, I felt there was a need to clarify the legal framework surrounding their existence, and specifically to focus on the obligations of refugee receiving states towards individuals who are fleeing a country where a safe zone is located. Given the limited space in my paper, I took quite a broad approach, and I identified three major issues that could result from the existence or the establishment of safe zones in conflict-affected contexts. First, the closure of borders and other pushback practices that deny individuals access to asylum procedures. Second, the rejection of asylum claims under what is referred to as the internal protection alternative. So this is the argument there is a place of safety against persecution in the individual's country of origin. And then third, the return of individuals to these spaces. So I referred to the terms of the Refugee Convention and other regional instruments for refugee protection, as well as the complementary and reinforcing application of IHL and human rights law in order to dismantle these three possible responses. And within my analysis, I then examined these three issues in the context of a number of possible scenarios, using the Syrian example as a key point of reference. So I looked at the situation where a safe zone is created by or with the consent of the home state, so the state on whose territory the safe zone is located. And then I considered the more common situation where the safe zone is imposed non-consensually by a foreign power. So this required consideration of issues of occupation, among others. And then finally, I considered how the presence of UN peacekeeping forces could impact an assessment, specifically related to the internal protection alternative. So my key conclusion was that in light of the absence of genuine and also durable safety for the inhabitants of safe zones in most prior instances, they cannot be relied on as a substitute for refugee protection under international law. And I argued with reference to international refugee law, IHL, and human rights law norms that they cannot be a justification for the closure of borders. They cannot automatically be used to reject an individual's asylum claim. And they also should not be considered as a place for individuals to be expected to return to and then settle in a long-term manner. And ultimately, I concluded that if safe zones are to be established, this should be strictly in line with the IHL framework as a short-term and ad hoc response with the consent of all parties to the conflict and with the sole intention of providing genuine protection to civilians rather than to circumvent a state's obligations under international law. So that is a brief overview of this very interesting topic. I think that the conclusions of my paper can be useful in the continuing Syrian context, but also, as Francois mentioned, I think it can be applicable if we see safe zones established in the future, as I argued was very likely, as it can help to ensure the continued protection of persons who are forced to flee conflict scenarios, regardless of the existence of a proclaimed safe zone in their country of origin or not. And therefore, in that respect, I see it as closely in line with the spirit and the commitment of Henry Dunant to the protection of victims of war and persecution. So I will stop there. Again, a huge thank you to the Geneva Academy and also to the Henry Dunant Foundation for this research prize, and thank you to everyone here and those online for listening to me this evening. Thank you.
Congratulations, Harriet, for your LLM paper, which was truly excellent. And as a cherry on the cake, I can announce also that thanks to a partnership with the International Committee of the Red Cross, the LLM papers, which won the Henry Dunant Prize, gets then published in the International Review of the Red Cross. So I would like to thank Bruno de Meyer, the editor-in-chief of the review, for this collaboration, because I think it's a great opportunity for our students. So now, let's discuss about the best Llm and Mtj papers. We have had to select papers for those prizes, and it was not easy because they were really excellent theses. But we had to find who would get it. I have to say also that for the XMAS, we don't have this year an XMAS paper. It has never been the case in the past for historical and organizational reasons. But the good news is that for the students, or the participants rather, starting this new academic year, there will be also an XMAS best paper. So that is part of the future and part of what we aim for. But for tonight, we have two best Llm and Mtj prizes. So I will start with the list of nominees for the best LLM prize. I think they deserve all to be mentioned, so I will tell their name. We have Tamara Abu Ramadan, Victoria Arnal, Andrew Botts, Carl Söderstam, Giulia Fattori, Anna Caristo, Charlotte Labrosse, Harriet Macy, Maxim Nitz, and Mina Radoncic. And the winner is Maxim Nitz. So his thesis is about humanizing siege warfare, applying the principle of proportionality to sieges.
Wow. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the faculty of the Geneva Academy for rewarding me this prize. It is truly an honor to receive such an award from so many international legal experts. And it is a great encouragement for me as I am just about to take my first steps as an IHL practitioner. My paper deals with siege warfare, which is a method of warfare that has been employed by belligerents throughout history. One of the most infamous examples is perhaps the siege of Troy, which dates back to the 13th century BC, and which is depicted in Homeros's Iliad. Nevertheless, contemporary armed conflicts have been characterized by a resurgence of sieges, predominantly in urban areas. The sieges led on numerous cities such in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and at this very moment, Tigray, have again drawn the attention of the international community to the devastating humanitarian consequences of this method of warfare. The protection of civilians in the context of sieges has been studied primarily through the lens of the prohibition of starvation and the rules regulating humanitarian relief operations. However, in my paper, I demonstrate that these rules provide inadequate protection to civilians in siege contexts. First, states, but also the ICRC, interpret the prohibition of starvation restrictively, as allowing sieges as long as their purpose is to achieve a military objective and not to starve the civilian population. Since establishing such a purposive element is very difficult, the protective function of this prohibition has been significantly diminished. Second, I demonstrate that shifting the focus from the prohibition of starvation to the rules which regulate humanitarian relief is not helpful in practice, since it is controversial if and under what circumstances a besieging party might withhold consent to such operations. Moreover, a number of states argue that if they allow civilians to leave a besieged area, they have the possibility to starve those who remain. In remedying this protection gap, I argue that the principle of proportionality should constrain the enforcement of sieges and should protect civilians against incidental harm, which might be expected to be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated by the siege. However, before I could deal with the proportionality analysis of a siege as such, I had to answer an essential preliminary question, namely whether a siege, and more specifically its isolation and encirclement aspect, can be considered an attack in the sense of the first additional protocol to which the principle of proportionality applies. I presented three arguments to substantiate the claim that it does. First, I argue that the notion of attack under IHL is sufficiently flexible to encompass sieges, given their harmful consequences. Second, an analogy can be made to naval and aerial blockades, to which sieges display a number of similarities and where the principle of proportionality has become part and parcel of the applicable legal framework. Finally, there also appears to be growing support among states and experts that the principle of proportionality constrains the enforcement of a siege. This brought me to the final and most difficult question of my research, namely how the principle of proportionality, which is already notoriously difficult to apply with regard to kinetic attacks, operates in the context of long-term and uncertain siege operations. Here I found that most of the difficulties can be overcome by construing the proportionality analysis of sieges as a form of continuous monitoring, whereby the besieging force must continuously analyze the actual impact of a siege on the civilian population, but also its impact on the enemy forces. However, given the anticipatory nature of the principle of proportionality under IHL, such information cannot lead to the conclusion that the siege was disproportionate, but should inform the commander whether the decision to continue the siege violates the principle of proportionality. Militaries consider siege warfare essential, especially in cities and other urban areas. As the world keeps on urbanizing, so does armed conflict. It can therefore be expected that sieges will be increasingly used by belligerents in the future. Although applying the principle of proportionality in this context poses distinct challenges, I believe that it at least has a procedural value of having military commanders confront the trade-off between civilian losses and the military advantage of a siege, which in the end could contribute in further humanizing this method of warfare. Before I am concluding this presentation, I would like to, of course, thank my supervisor, Professor Gloria Gaggioli, whose articles on siege warfare sparked my interest in this topic and whose comments throughout the drafting process were inspiring. Special thanks also goes out to my family and, of course, my girlfriend for their endless support throughout this year. And finally, of course, a big congratulations for my fellow graduates here tonight and also online. And I hope to see you at the party tonight. Thank you.
Congratulations, Maxim, and good luck tonight with the girlfriends. Let's have a look now at the list of nominees for the best MTJ paper. So here again, I want to give their names explicitly because they deserve it. We have Angela Draganic, Isa Hernandez Herrera, Arnav Kaul, Juliana Laguna Trujillo, Dasha Reddy, and Dora Sayari. And the winner is Dasha Reddy.
I am incredibly honored to have been selected for this year's Best MTJ Paper Prize, especially given the high quality of papers that my remarkable classmates produced. I feel so thankful to have had the opportunity to be part of this program. Despite its numerous challenges, delving into topics such significance with some of the most intellectually inspired minds has motivated me in ways that I am forever grateful. I came to this program from a public health background, eager to explore topics at the intersection of health, human rights, and transitional justice. Lucky enough to have had co-directors, professors, and classmates that emphasized a cross-disciplinary approach to transitional justice, I was able to learn in a very open-minded environment and build upon my perceptions of justice, truth, reparations, and prevention. It was with this support that the MTJ paper became the perfect avenue for me to deepen my knowledge and passion on health rights advocacy. My paper, Post-Conflict Rehabilitation for Victims of Micro to Macro Health Violence, aimed to understand how the transitional justice concept of rehabilitation could be expanded upon to address health violence. Currently, transitional justice frameworks for rehabilitation would see an act of health violence, such as torture, addressed through the implementation of psychological or medical services. But by using the context of South Africa and Peru, I was able to demonstrate that in conflict settings, instances of direct interpersonal violence often occur within the larger context of structural health violence. For example, such an act of torture in a conflict setting is often enabled by an entire discriminatory system working at numerous levels to result in individual harm. So, individual medical and psychological services as the entire scope of rehabilitation is not only reductionist, but it becomes inadequate to address health violence occurring on massive scales. This understanding paved the way for me to create a new framework for rehabilitation. Drawing from my experience in public health, I proposed what I call the dual SEM transformative framework. It is a theory of change that looks at different levels of society, individual, interpersonal, community, organizational, and legal levels to identify the multifaceted nature of health violence. I recommended that the types of violence identified can then be connected to transformative goals at each of those 5 levels in order to work towards a more comprehensive rehabilitation in post-conflict environments. My ability to successfully complete this paper was contingent on an endless pouring of support from numerous individuals. My deepest gratitude to Professor Homber, my supervisor and mentor, for working through countless drafts with me and providing much needed wisdom and guidance throughout the entire process. Thank you also to our co-directors, Dr. Frank Haldeman and Thomas Unger, for helping me to realize my passion for transitional justice and the way that it connects with health. I must also thank the numerous classmates that became lifelong friends. I am eternally grateful for your friendship and support throughout all of this year. Lastly, I thank you to my partner and my family for the boundless love that has allowed me to confidently and creatively begin carving my own path in this field. This award has been such a humbling and inspiring experience. I will continue to push forward with the work that has allowed me to receive such a high honor. Thank you again.
Congratulations, Dasha. This was a very original paper. So now, we are reaching the climax of this ceremony with the actual graduation. So I'm going to call the names of the students per achievement category. And when I call your name, you can come here on the podium. You can remove your mask when you are on the podium. I'm going to give you the diploma. We are going to have a beautiful picture here, and then you can leave that way. You have also some gel hydroalcoholic over there, so you can use that to disinfect your hands if you want. And I'm going also to use it before giving you the diploma. So we are going to start with the LLM, and so with those who are in person here. First, I'll start with the list of people having a summa cum laude. I call Arnal Victoria. Charlotte Labrosse. Harriet Macy. Maxime Nitz. Florentina Pircher. Jimena Posleman. Anna Schum. Revas Kemaladze. Now we have the list of magna cum laude. Tamara Aburamadan. Andrew Butts. Giulia Fattori. Sophie Masson. Stéphanie Moutassa. Emma Pisani. Hector Sharp. we have the list of cum laude. Elisabeth Abel. Nadine Llm. Daniela Ferreira. Nicole Fracarol. Mandakini Jatavetan. Antonia Merlini. Teresa Milosova. Mira Nayak. Léa Redae. Zachary Thomas. Katharina Maria Werner. Now, without mentions, we have Ahong Dimon. Danushka Narmada Amaravancha. Namandeep Jain. Siba Khatib. Kajal Parvani. Malvika Hanta. Now the list of students from the LLM who are following online. Summa cum laude, we have Mina Radoncic. Eric Weaver. Magna cum laude, Katarina Trentin. Cum laude, Lulbari Araya. Amen Bekele. Marie Boyenval. Anna Caristo. Miles Lovell. Carolina Machado. Yukfung Violette Wong. And without distinction, Catarina Tavarella Ferreira de Brito Mendes. Angelica Windstrom. Don't worry, we did not forget you. Let's go for the MTJ now. So in person, for the summa cum laude, Andela Draganic. Isa Cristina Hernandez Herrera. Juliana Laguna Trujillo. Magna cum laude, Gillian Rose Aragon. Enrico Romana. Ana Milena Elias. Tatiana Milovanovic. Maëva Mathilde Renet. Maria Astrid Reyes Carreras. Bettina Roska. Dora Sayari. Livia Tufano. Antu Vo. Olena Vinogradova. Next generations. Cum laude now. Besnik Bekac. Samana Shabani. Abel Atikumar Vijayakumar. So now we have the list of MTJ students following online. Summa cum laude, Dasha Reddy. Geneviève Rohrer. Magna cum laude, Neima Shifa. Cum laude, Rida Alji. And Sashi Windsor. Last but not least, we have now the graduation for the Executive Master in International Law in Armed Conflict. So in person, we have Farhat Ayesha. Christian Durich. Monica Garcia Perello. George Spindler. Mohibullah Taib. For those following online, we have Tarek Tavil, Rosella Ourou, Saïd Kondondoli, Ziad Elmir El Ayoubi, Dimitra Kimouzi, Maya Hamadeh, Gillian Ketane, and Abdul Ahad Chirzad. So congratulations to all of you. I guess now you are starving, and the good news is that we have a nice cocktail awaiting you in the cafeteria of the Maison de la Paix. So you are all invited, and so I hope to be able to continue talking with you. I hope to have always contacts with you to know what you will be doing in the future. And as was said during this evening, we are a family. And so even if we are far away from each other, I hope we can keep contacts. Thank you for all the speakers. Thank you for your energy and enthusiasm, and enjoy your evening. All the very best. Thank you.